This is the advantage to being the pastor. I don't have to wear a mask. We bought some new ones the other day, and they're supposed to be cooler. Somebody buy it. And I'm sorry that I'm 100, it's supposed to be 109 this afternoon. I'm going to bypass the coat. Now go to Luke chapter 12. Luke chapter 12. This is a chapter that's just full of different sayings, different parables, different instructions. There's always principles that you can draw out of here. And before I get too deep into this, one of the things I'd like to kind of add to this, we have a family, Cisneros. I think they are going through a real bad time, and if you would like to help them out, just put the money in the envelope or a check and write on the bottom of it for the Cisneros, and we will make sure that they get it. And their daughter has cancer, and it's a bad cancer at this bad time. So now to go through some happy things. Got a couple of grandpas here. Got their grandpas in the back, grandma and grandpa in the back with their new baby. They've got Dave, and Jim Chivitt has, I think, got most of us that were where Millie had her baby. Nathan, he's healthy, doing well. And Jonathan Chivitt, who was a young man who went to school here for a while, and he's got a new baby back in Florida. So need to pray for them. So, and what we want to look at today is life itself. And life itself here is actually what we focus on, what we do. It's one of the economists who's been very famous in America said, money is a singular thing. It ranks with love as man's greatest source of joy, and with death as his greatest source of anxiety. And you know, that's just very true. If you stop and think about it, that's the one thing that we're really prone to worry about, is money. We don't have enough, we worry about how to get it. If we have plenty, we worry about how to keep it. And it's just kind of a normal thing. It's like a thin stream, one man said. It cuts a channel into everything else that we do. And it's something which ends up being, if it's not stopped, the worry is something which ends up being very destructive. And it can become something that cuts a very deep channel in our life. And Christ is teaching here on this very thing. He repeats it in several ways. Somebody said the other day that, teaching, which tend to be repetitive. I mean, Christ is very repetitive, especially on certain things. He knows if we don't correct our attitude on it, we'll become extremely destructive. In verse 22, he's got a large crowd around him, so I'm sure that many of the other people heard him. And he said unto his disciples, verse 22, Luke chapter 12, therefore I say unto you, take no thought for your life and what you shall eat, neither for the body what you shall put on. The life is more than meat, and the body is more than raiment. Consider the ravens, for they neither sow nor reap, which neither have storehouse nor barn, and God feeds them. How much more are you better than the fowls? In which of you, with taking thought, can add to his stature 1 cubit? If ye then be not able to do that thing which is least, why take ye thought for the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They toil not, they spin not, and yet I say unto you that Solomon in all of his glory was not arrayed like one of these. If then God so doth clothe the grass, which is today in the field, and tomorrow is cast unto the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O you of little faith? And seek not you what you shall eat, or what you shall drink, neither be ye of doubtful mind. For all these things do the nations of the world seek after, and your Father knoweth that you have need of these things. But rather seek you the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell that you have and give alms. Provide yourself bags which wax not old, a treasure in the heavens that faileth not, where no thief approaches, neither moth corrupts. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And he brings it down here to a point that we use very often. Where our heart is where our treasure is, or where our treasure is shows where our heart is. And that's something that becomes pretty obvious in people's lives. And it's something which, if we're not careful, begins to really destroy us. I know that many people seek wealth. They seek to gain wealth. They seek to make themselves secure. It's a day that if you've got an IRA, you watch your IRA, you watch what's going on in the stock market, and if it goes up or down, depending on it, you're very, very fearful. I have a man that I talk to frequently, and he said that he's gained or lost over $200,000 in the past 3 months. That's up, down, and up, and down. It is money that he had put into his retirement account, looking forward to it, and he said it's just very difficult to keep track of it. So it's something that we do worry about. It's something that we all need. It's something you can't get along without, yet it's very hard and difficult not to stew about it. And what Jesus wants is his followers to be free from this worry. He wants us, in all reality, to be able to focus on him and focus on other people. Focus on him and on other people. And the concept here is not so much, and I think that, if you read this thing in some ways, and I've had people tell me this, we need to just give it all away. One man told me that he did too. He gave it all away, and he was sure that God would provide everything. He even quit his job. He did everything. I mean, it's just like some of us would like to do. However, it didn't work. And of course, it ended up with him going to work and buying back what he had already thrown away. But he wants us to be, Jesus wants us to be free from the dangers that come with money, the greed, the living for the world without a view to eternity. And he shows them that anxiety is opposed to God. If you're very anxious, you're full of worry, and you're constantly viewing and looking at the world saying, how do I get more money? Your eyes are no longer on God, they're on the money. They really are. And I think it's just something that we have to be concerned about. And to really get rid of our worry about money, we have to trust in God. He will provide. Now, I have to tell you right off the bat, God provides, but not in our time. And so often, that becomes something that we stew about. We get to a point to where we're sure he's not going to do anything. And it's always been kind of interesting because about the time I really get to the point where I think we're going to go broke, something's going to happen. I walked in and opened up the freezer the other day and got a ice cream bar out of there. We were going to have one each. Man, it was so soft. It just almost would run out of your fingers. Oh, no. And, I said something to Josie, and we know we've got a bad refrigerator. We're quite sure of that. And I turned it up a little bit, and it started working. Now everything is covered in ice, but it's working. But, we kind of have a temptation to just get into the stew because we know that life always has a means and a way of making sometimes things very tough. We kind of sang a song. I was hopeful I'd forgotten Leonard was gone this morning on vacation. And I kind of forgot because we have a friend of ours that's a mutual friend, and he always sings this little song, "Don't worry, be happy." And some of you know who that is, and you also know that he'll come into a room and the first thing he says is, "Everybody happy?" Well, yeah, you can be happy. But what basis do you have for that? Actually, when you come in there with that type of an attitude, you don't have any basis for that. If you're a non-Christian, You can say, I'm happy. But I've also noticed that when things go down, a lot of those people who are happy are then sad and overwhelmed. Yet I see other people who are able to go through. A Christian should be able to say, don't worry. I mean, our song should be, don't worry, trust God. Because that's an objective truth that we can look at and be true in. We can't have a blind optimism that just lets us focus on something which is unrealistic. So point number one is to solve our worries about money. We must trust in the God who cares for us. King James says in verse number 22, therefore I say to you, take no thought for your life, what you shall eat, neither shall eat, neither for the body which you shall put on. Okay, if you take that from the way it reads, it says what? Don't worry about anything, God will provide it. Only we know that also Scripture is full of principles, commandments into it. He that does not work, what? Yes. Does not eat. We know it says you should provide for your own. We know all those things to be true, and sometimes it seems to be an irony that's just difficult to work out. On one hand, he's saying, give it all away, and the other hand, he's saying, work diligently to be a rich man. Are there rich people in Scripture? You know, I sat there when I was doing this last night, and I've done this before. I look and want to say, you know what, there's more rich people in Scripture than there are poor people. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, Solomon. Boy, you just go down the list, it's a ton of people. What's the difference? Well, one is every one of those people who are very wealthy mentioned in Scripture, their focus is not on the things of the world. Their focus is on God. And they do what God asks them to do. And by doing so, they find themselves in places where they fall into, it's probably not a good way to put it, but God provides. God provides in very unique ways. I thought with Abraham, he had driven his flocks into Egypt. He comes back out, he is wealthy. He goes into the land around the Dead Sea, and his nephew takes some of the best of the land, but when it's all said and done, Abraham is more than well provided for. He's extremely wealthy. David's not a man that's seeking wealth. David's a young man. There's nothing said about his seeking wealth. He's out taking care of the sheep. God calls him and says, I want you for king. And what goes along with being a king? Invariably is wealth. Of course, you also get the word that goes along with it too. But you know, I think sometimes we look at this verse and we say, well, it takes no thought for your life, and it's meaning you don't even consider what life is like. What it's actually saying is, don't worry. If you take a look at translation from the original, it's saying, don't worry. In the King James in 1611, this was a fitting translation. It's saying, don't worry. Don't put your focus away from the things that God has for you. Don't put your focus on the things of the world. One of the things that's repeated in here, you're going to hear it this morning, is the nations of the earth. Now, that's another word that's used there is the Gentiles. Gentiles is another word for non-believers. It's also a word for foreigners. And it's always been kind of a differentiation here between believers and non-believers, that non-believers focus on the things of this world. What else do they have to focus on? What else do they have to live for? At the end of their life, they're what? They're gone. It's done. They buy insurance. They do all the things that you normally would do. You provide for your family. You do the things, and then actually, in many cases, it turns out you haven't provided for it all. And I think sometimes we forget that to worry about money should not be there, because what really concerns Jesus more than anything is our soul and not the body. Soul, not the body. I was trying to think about how to go into this because we say the soul, and I think immediately some people get confused. We begin to try and sort things out, what it means. Because here Christ is really saying to his disciples, what you really need to focus on is what's left. I really started to put some clothes in the bag and just bring them to the pulpit and dump them. You know, if you've ever settled up in an estate, you've ever cleaned things up from an estate, you know right away the things that happen are you turn around and somebody has to go in and clean everything up. They bring in garbage cans and they bring in garbage bags. And the garbage cans, they literally fill up with what was treasured often by a family or a family member. And I've used it before. My dad was the last one to pass away. But it could be several others. I've gone in and helped Leonard, and I did a couple of them. Then you go in and that's your life. It's in that plastic bag. And you know what's going to happen next? You're going to call Savers, you're going to call Goodwill, or you know, you can name any number of ones. You're going to call them, make an appointment. They come out, they load it all up on a truck, they're gone with it. They put it on the table, it's sold to somebody else. It starts all over again. And what do you have left? You actually don't have anything left. You know, it's this verse here is actually saying, don't stew about it. Don't put your focus on the money aspect. I am not saying don't be a good businessman. I've got a couple of you sitting in here who are business people. There's nothing wrong with having money. There's nothing wrong with focusing, but when it becomes something that it just takes over everything that you do, it dominates a marriage. It dominates rearing children. It dominates everything that you do. And it's strictly things that you cannot change. I was reading last night how many, we've tried to reopen our economy. Do you have any idea how many businesses have been destroyed? Just gone. One I've really kind of questioned, I've been curious about it, is Tejas over here. And I noticed this, there's nothing up there except, we'll call you or call us. But right now we're not open. What happened to them? Where'd they go? Did they sustain it? Or have they just declared bankruptcy or fixing to and they're gone? That's a terrible thing to have happen to a person. You have to stop and think about that. When this thing began, a couple of people were just really uptight about the finances. And actually our giving went up for a while. And Letty and I talked to him, I said, the one thing that's really good about Sun Valley, we're made up basically of retired people or active duty military. What's that mean? They get a check. We don't be real cocky about that one. There was a couple of pictures I was reading in an article last night. There were a couple of pictures in that article of a couple of generals who, at that point, both weren't generals, but one of them was, and they cleared out the veterans out of a park in Washington. And the general was a guy by the name of Douglas MacArthur. Standing next to him is his aide. You know who that was? Dwight Eisenhower. It's one of the last cavalry charges made by the U.S. Army, and they simply cleared it out. Later, it became during the Great Depression. They were clearing out people out of streets and so forth. And they had been promised certain things, and now the federal government couldn't make it. And I stopped to think of what would happen if you suddenly didn't get your Social Security check. We didn't get our retired check. You say that's not possible.
Yeah, it is.
Let Biden get in.
I hate to tell you this, but it's happened in other places. It's happened more than once. He's really saying, Christ is saying here, don't worry about the thing that's not actually the most important matter in your life. Food and clothing should not be your main worry. It should be your eternal soul. That should be your main concern. And also the idea, the concept, what does God want from me? Sometimes you want to look back and say, God, you don't understand. If I'm not concerned about the money, I'm going to freeze to death. And the answer comes back, yeah, but if you're really concerned about the money, it may be a lot hotter than you want it to be. And you may have to stop and think about that one for a minute, but I hope it comes through. Because if I'm not concerned about my eternal soul enough to make it secure and make it what it should be, I may be very secure in a place I don't want to be in. Whereas a Christian can say, yeah, if I have to starve to death, at least when I arrive in heaven, I get a meal in a mansion. And it's got refrigerated air conditioning. I don't think we think in those terms. We're Americans. We tend to think in terms of things are always good. You know, I have looked back over my lifetime and considered the things that were always so tough. I can remember during the 70s, I was working as a salesman, and that was the time and place when many of you remember we had a deep recession. Well, during that time, there's some things that were going on that happened to fall on my bailiwick, and I made the best money of my life. And it was something that I was always surprised when everybody else was having a hard time. God provided. He provided. I didn't see that till later, but it's something that we need to stop and think. I should not be thinking about the things sometimes I cannot even change. And we really shouldn't worry about money in the sense that we do, because he even considers us to be more than the raven. You know that the raven, verse 24, consider the ravens, for they neither sow nor reap. What's unique about the raven is he only mentioned in the New Testament of ravens. Are they a clean bird or a dirty bird? They're a dirty bird. They're on the list of dirty birds. What do they eat? Anything. They are just like the vultures. They eat